What does it mean to be unfaithful? It doesn't necessarily mean you're cheating on a boyfriend or girlfriend. It can mean that. But really, at the heart of the word, it means to fail someone. Humans are known for failing each other. By nature, we're not faithful. People fail each other even if they love each other. And this failure on each other often leads to trust issues. And sometimes our trust issues with people can turn into trust issues with God. No matter how much we know in our heads that God is faithful, it doesn't resonate in our hearts. And it may even get to the point where we begin to expect the worst from God, just like we do with people. We just brace ourselves just in case God doesn't actually follow through with his promises. But God is faithful. We don't have to do that with God. We don't need to have a backup plan just in case God doesn't come through, because he is faithful. The word faithful, as it's used in the Bible, literally means that we can support ourselves on God. We can lean on him. God will not fail us. He's not human. He's not like us. God never fails, and his love never fails us. 2 Timothy 2:13 says, if we are faithless, he will remain faithful. Even when we fail him, he's not going to use that as an excuse to give up on us. Human nature often tells us that we have the right to start being unfaithful to someone if they were unfaithful to us first. For instance, they cheated on me. Well, I'm not going to be faithful to them anymore. I'm going to go cheat on them too. Or my best friend didn't come to my birthday party. Well, we're not friends anymore. I'm not going to any of her parties either. This is evil rooted deep in our hearts, that spite that's in us that just makes us want to get back at people, or this attitude that we have that if they aren't going to be faithful to us, then we don't have to be faithful to them. But God's not like that. God doesn't have that spite in his heart like we do. When we turn our backs on him, he doesn't use that as an excuse to turn his backs on us. We can rely on God to be faithful because he will not treat us that way. He's not going to treat us the way that we treat him. That, however, doesn't mean that there won't be consequences for our unfaithfulness. If he promises a punishment, there's going to be a punishment. He's going to be faithful to follow through with it. God is a God of blessings for sure, but he also has to issue out consequences when we don't obey him. That's something any good father would do. He's not a father that only means the good things and not the bad. That would only mean he was half faithful. If he was faithful to follow through with his promises when the promise was something of a blessing, but every time that he promised punishment, he kind of backed out at the last second, we would only be able to half trust him to be faithful. In order for God to be completely faithful, God had to follow through with the consequences as well. The difference is his punishment is never going to be to give up on us. God is faithful to stick with us, even if he does have to give us some consequences. A good example of God sticking with us is seen in the book of Hosea. God calls Hosea, a prophet, a man of God, to marry a prostitute. This isn't a prostitute that's forced into it. This is a prostitute that's choosing to be unfaithful. God asks Hosea to do this so that Israel can see what it's like to be married to them. So Hosea marries this woman who's choosing to be unfaithful. And instead of choosing to be faithful because she's so grateful that a man of God has chosen her and is married to her, she runs off and starts living in her old ways. She starts being unfaithful to him and sleeping with other men. You must imagine that Hosea probably felt betrayed and hurt and really upset by this. Hosea, after all, was human. But when it came time that Hosea's wife was being sold for more prostitution, Hosea calls out and bids on her. And she was being sold at half price. Probably because she might have just been so worn out from years of being in prostitution. But Hosea, even though he had that opportunity, he could have bid on another girl, or he could have just left and completely washed his hands of her. Instead, he bid on her. He was willing to pay however much money it took to get her back. He saw her up there, and instead of turning his back on her, he chose to love her. He said, "No, I want her." And that's exactly what Jesus did for us. We are that prostitute wife. We've been unfaithful to God through our sin. We've failed God. But Jesus bid for us. Jesus paid the price for our sins. He saw how dirty with sin we were. He saw our hearts and the condition of our hearts that were just awful. But he still looked at us and desired to have us back in spite of our unfaithfulness. And though we've rejected God, he's accepted us. Every time we sin, every time we disobey God or displease him, we're rejecting God. But he still chooses to accept us. Jesus still chose to die on the cross and give his life and shed his blood so that relationship and that communication with God could be restored. It's because he desires to have us back. He's not only taking us back, he's not only forgiving us, but he's cleansing us too. Through Jesus' death on the cross, our hearts that are dirty with sin can be cleansed from all unrighteousness. He can clean us up and make us pure again. And though we've rejected him, he's faithful to purify us from all unrighteousness and take that extra step just because he loves us. And there's nothing that we can do to be exempt from that grace. Because God is faithful even when we are not. And it's for no other reason than he loves us. He sees how unfaithful we are. He has seen every instance of your unfaithfulness to him, but you're still worth it to him. He still looks at you with value. He still says, "I want you, and I'm going to pay the price for you because I love you." He still thought you were worth dying for, even though you had rejected him. So let him buy you. He's already purchased you with his blood, so accept that gift. Come to him today and let him make you new. Turn from your old ways of unfaithfulness and start trying to be faithful to him too. For he loves you. And if there's anyone that deserves our faithfulness, it's God. God bless.